let's start with, why do you think silver's at $18? And
Mhm.
out of the two, you have your smaller gold company, First Mining Gold, but you've really positioned yourself more in silver than gold. And so you've said things like you believe it's going to go to $100 an ounce. So I'd love for you to elaborate on why, not only the thesis of why you really believe in $100 silver, but why silver over gold. When you've had 35 years in the industry, you could have went into gold where it's less volatile, and tell me a little bit about why you think those.
Well, I came from the copper business. I put together First Quantum Minerals back in the early 90s and left that company in 2000. So I'm really a supply demand fundamentalist. I believe that markets ultimately prevail. In other words, markets go through periods of disconnect or mispricing. Look at Tesla, for example. There's lots of companies out there that are mispriced, and the mining sector right now is mispriced as well, but on the other side of the pendulum. So silver is I've been asked, okay, well, why don't you think silver is precious metals? Well, I actually do think silver is a very precious metal, but I actually think it's greater than a precious metal. I think it's a strategic metal, because this call, you just told me before that this call started, you're turning 29, and so you've grown up in an environment where you're surrounded by technology. When I was your age, there was really very little technology around. I remember the fax machine, being invented. I remember the black and white television, first color TVs coming out. I remember all this stuff, and laptops and computers and so on and so forth. I was actually a computer salesman when I was in my early 20s for a company called NCR, which is a major U.S. technology company. But nevertheless, that's not that important. But my point is, all these technologies that we take for granted consume vast amounts of silver. And we're only mining on a worldwide scale 8 to 1. So for every 1 ounce of gold we're only mining 8 ounces of silver, which is pretty ludicrous. And when Sir Isaac Newton was asked, by King Henry VIII, back in the 1500s, what should we value the sterling at? 16 to 1, because there's 16 ounces. So King said, okay, fine. So that was his view of what was in the Earth's crust compared to gold, 16 to 1, and that number's held up over the years. But we're mining 8 to 1, so we're actually mining less than what the scientists think that's available in the Earth's crust, which tells you that silver is way more unique, or way more rare than what the market actually thinks it is. So if the price actually traded at close to its mining rate, which of course I just said is 8 to 1, that's going to put triple-digit prices on silver. And in a gold bull market, which I'm pretty sure we're in, well, I'm confident we're in, when we're going to see $2,000-$3,000 gold and likely higher, what's that going to do to the price of silver?
I'm hoping that it pulls it way up there. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, I think it's inevitable, because look, look at our website. We're selling silver today at $21 an ounce. This is our own silver that we produce, and of course, there's fabrication costs and so on and so forth, and plus our mining costs and everything else. But at $21 an ounce, we're not really making any money. It just covers the cost of that part of our business. It's not really our core business. You see people out there selling silver at $23, $24, $25 an ounce because they're trying to have a legitimate profit-making business, and they have to sell the metal at $6-7 above spot. That tells you that there's a problem in the physical markets.
And all of this type of actual fundamentals and supply and demand is what made you say it makes more sense when you went to First Majestic next. It made you feel like it just made a lot more sense because of the overall financial potential. If you can handle the volatility, it just made more sense to be in the silver space versus the gold when you were rationally looking at this back then.
I love gold. You know, I'm the chairman of First Mining Gold Corp, and I've assembled, I think, one of the best gold portfolios for any junior gold company in the space. And you know, your listeners should go and look at that company. It's very cheaply traded in Canada, and I think it's going to do quite well over time. But gold is quite different than silver. Silver is very much a commodity, very much a strategic metal that's required in everything we do as the human race. You know, if you took silver out of your life today, your life would be dramatically different. You couldn't fly, you couldn't drive, you couldn't use your computer. A lot of our energy would not be available to us. It would have a ricochet throughout the entire economy, and this is pretty new. You go back to the mid '80s, where silver was primarily used in silverware and coinage, and you know, collector items. It wasn't really used so well. Electronics didn't exist for the most part. All that above ground supply that the governments used to own in the form of coinage, you know, going back to the 60s and 70s, was consumed in the 90s and the early 2000s, and all that silver is gone.
Consumed for an industrial purpose?
Consumed for electronics and industrial purposes. And how many people do you know that have recycled their television or recycled their cell phone? These machines, or these components that we put silver into over the last 30 years, for the most part, has ended up in waste dumps. And you know, because recycling silver out of a 40-inch television would cost you more than the silver's worth, right? So you just couldn't do it, right? And because the price is high enough. You know, maybe at $150 silver, okay, maybe recycling televisions, you know, starts to make a little bit of sense. But we're a long ways away from that ever happening, in my view, and that's a totally different discussion that is probably not suited for this time. But gold is quite different. 90% of all gold ever mined by the human race is sitting on the surface in some form, because it's not used in industry. It's in vaults, it's in, you know, bars, or, you know, coins or whatever. 90% of all silver ever mined in the human race is in the ocean, is in waste dumps, never to be used again, unless of course we have crazy silver price, which makes it economic for people to go start mining waste dumps.
Right.
I'm not sure, you know, are we 100 years away from that? I have no idea, but it's definitely not there today.